My wanted to marry a tycoon in place of a poor Chloe's grandmother was on her deathbed, having arranged her marriage to a tycoon and insisting it happen in 5 days. Ostensibly, it was to fulfill her grandmother's dying wish, but in reality, it was to secure wedding funds for her younger brother. It had nothing to do with me, until my best friend played a recording for me. I can't let Chloe fall into a trap. Chloe and Grace are about the same build, with makeup, they'll surely look even more alike. Once the ceremony is over, we'll switch Grace into the bridal chamber. After all, Grace is the Everest heiress, no one would dare mess with her. Chloe will have already been swapped out, and they won't be able to arrange another wedding on such short notice anyway. I would recognize the owner of that voice even if he were reduced to ashes. It was my beloved boyfriend, Ethan. My best friend asked what I planned to do. I sneered, of course, Chloe will marry him herself. But I'll make sure Ethan is the one who gets married. Grace, are you really going through with this? My best friend Olivia's voice was filled with excitement. Of course. I've never gone easy on scum. I hung up the phone, my fingertips tracing the cold rim of my coffee cup, my eyes as calm as a still lake. After sent me the recording, I immediately had my assistant look into Chloe's fiancé. 5 minutes later, a detailed file appeared in my inbox. Marcus, 35 years old, a self-made man. In his photo, he had an ordinary appearance, even a bit unrefined, but his eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. From a poor country boy, he'd clawed his way to the top of the construction industry in 10 years, ruthless in his methods, with a reputation that wasn't exactly stellar, but his capabilities were beyond question. The last line of the file detailed his recent activities. He was trying to push his way into the Everest's new energy project, no matter the cost. This was a perfect entry point for me. I looked at Marcus's company address in the file, picked up my phone, and dialed his number directly. In less than 10 minutes, a tall, burly figure pushed open the coffee shop door. The quintessential nouveau riche image. He walked directly to my table and sat opposite me, his gaze unreservedly sweeping over me, filled with scrutiny and curiosity. Ms. Grace, what a pleasant surprise. I didn't bother with pleasantries, pushing my phone towards him. Mr. Marcus, someone wants your $500,000 in wedding funds and also wants you to offend the Everest. Are you aware of this? I handed him my headphones and pressed play. Marcus's expression, initially surprised and bewildered, slowly turned livid, then he chuckled in furious amusement. Fine, just fine. He wasn't highly educated, and his views on marriage were straightforward. He simply wanted to find someone obedient, sensible, and caring to help him look after his daughter. That's why he listened to the matchmaker and chose Chloe. He never expected Chloe to be so dishonest, let alone capable of double-crossing him like this. Ms. Grace, what do you propose? He narrowed his eyes, already sensing an opportunity for collaboration. It's simple. I set down my coffee cup and leaned slightly forward. They want to pull off a switcheroo, so we'll let them, but the ones who get switched out will be themselves. They want to make a fool of Mr. Marcus, and I won't allow it. I have a plan that will get all your money back and let you get your revenge. He watched me with interest, so I continued. Marcus's eyes sharpened. Ms. Grace, this would mean being cuckolded in public. How will you compensate me for that? The new energy project, I said, meeting his gaze, enunciating each word. I can use my position on the board to secure the most favorable partnership terms for you, allowing you to bypass complicated bidding processes and go straight to the final review. Marcus's breath hitched slightly. This was undue. Tedly an offer he couldn't refuse. He finally grinned, showing a mouthful of white teeth, and laughed. Ms. Grace truly lives up to her reputation as an Everest heiress. A pleasure doing business with you. He extended his hand to me. I shook it. As expected, Ethan soon came to tell me about Chloe's wedding. He said his junior classmate had invited him to be a groomsman, and to avoid suspicion, he had to bring his official girlfriend along. I readily agreed. On the day of the wedding, I accompanied Ethan to the venue early. The hotel was lavishly decorated, everywhere reflecting Marcus's simple yet unrefined aesthetic. Chloe wore a pure white wedding dress, her face meticulously made up, yet it couldn't hide the sorrow and resentment in her eyes. She glanced at Ethan from time to time, like a lamb waiting to be saved. Ethan, meanwhile, wore a well-tailored white suit, looking dashing. As a competent groomsman, he bustled around the venue, handling various tasks. Every movement, every smile, seemed so appropriate, so perfect. Anyone unaware would have thought he was the groom. His and Chloe's eyes met frequently, filled with an unspoken understanding and comfort that outsiders couldn't comprehend. Their gazes seemed to say, "Don't be afraid, I'm here for you." It was truly nauseating. I sat in the VIP section, coldly observing the ridiculous performance. Marcus had also changed into a sharp suit today. While it still couldn't entirely mask his rough around the edges demeanor, he looked much more presentable than usual. The wedding ceremony proceeded as planned. When the MC announced the exchange of rings, Chloe's hand trembled severely, and it took several attempts to put the ring on. Ethan stood below the stage, watching her tenderly, his eyes full of encouragement. What a touching scene of profound affection. Soon, it was time for the toast. Marcus, arm in arm with Chloe, went from table to table offering toasts. Finally, they arrived at our table. Chloe held her glass, her eyes darting away, afraid to look at me. Ethan followed behind them, carrying a tray with several glasses of red wine already poured. He walked up to me and personally poured me a glass of wine, his voice so gentle it could melt butter. Grace, thank you for coming to bless Chloe. I looked at him, smiling brightly. It's only right. After all, she's my boyfriend's good junior classmate. If my boyfriend is here, of course, I have to be. Ethan's face stiffened for a moment, then returned to normal. Chloe's face, however, paled slightly. Marcus raised his glass and laughed heartily. Come on, Miss Grace, and this gentleman. Mr. Ethan, isn't it? It's my big day, let's all have a drink together. As he spoke, he clinked glasses with Chloe, then turned to us. Ethan also picked up a glass, handed one to Chloe, and took one for himself. Grace, let's toast Mr. Marcus and Chloe together. I saw that the moment he turned, his finger quickly brushed the rim of Chloe's glass. And, with the same subtle gesture, tampered with his glass. They believed their actions were flawless. But they didn't know that everything was clearly visible to Marcus and me. The four of us raised our glasses. To your happy marriage, I said with a smile. May you be together for 100 years, Marcus's voice boomed. Cheers! Marcus shouted, and was the first to drain his glass. I looked at Ethan and Chloe, smiled, and drank the wine in my glass. They watched us drink the spiked wine, and in the depths of their eyes, a flash of relieved joy appeared simultaneously. Then, without hesitation, they too drained the wine in their own glasses. They drank the truly spiked wine that was originally intended for us. The drug took effect faster than I anticipated. In less than 5 minutes, I saw Ethan's cheeks begin to flush abnormally, and his eyes grew hazy. Chloe fared even worse, her body went limp, almost collapsing, and Marcus caught her in one swift motion. 2 waiters, who had been waiting nearby, immediately stepped forward and, one on each side, supported Ethan, who was already weak and disoriented. At the same time, Marcus lifted the almost unconscious Chloe into his arms. My wife can't hold her liquor, I'll take her back to the bridal suite to rest. Ignoring faint struggles, he strode purposefully out of the banquet hall. The entire process was swift and seamless, perfectly coordinated. The surrounding guests simply assumed the newlyweds had a low tolerance for alcohol, and no suspicion was aroused. Watching their disappearing figures, I slowly picked up a glass of water, concealing the slight upward curve of my lips. About 20 minutes passed. This was enough time for the drug to fully take effect, and for them to do something irreparable. Marcus's phone vibrated on the table. He picked it up and glanced at it, a message from his subordinate. It contained only 3 words, target is in position. Marcus read the message, and a cold, cruel smile played on his lips. He slammed his hand on the table and abruptly stood up. The loud bang immediately drew everyone's attention. Everyone stared at him in surprise. Marcus, his face flushed and looking thoroughly inebriated, yelled with his slightly crude but highly infectious booming voice, "My dear friends and family, are you all having a good time?" The crowd responded in affirmation. My wife had a bit too much to drink and I sent her back to the room. But what kind of wedding is it without the bride? He scanned the room, raising his voice even higher. By the traditions of my hometown, a wedding isn't complete without a post-wedding party crashing. Am I right, everyone? His words immediately ignited the enthusiasm of the younger guests present. Yes. Post-wedding party crashing. Post-wedding party crashing. Cheers and shouts erupted, one after another, growing louder and louder. Chloe's parents sat at the main table, looking somewhat embarrassed, but seeing Marcus's jovial demeanor, they found it hard to object. They merely took it as a tycoon's crude sense of humor, unaware that a storm capable of dragging their entire family into hell was about to break. Seeing the atmosphere was perfectly set, Marcus waved his hand grandly. Let's go. What are we waiting for? Let's head up now and give the bride a big surprise. He led the way, a large throng of young people eager for excitement trailing behind him, making their way grandly towards the bridal suite upstairs. I also stood up, mingling with the crowd, following at a leisurely pace. My heart beat calmly in my chest. There was no tension, no excitement, only a cold sense of satisfaction. A crowd of people gathered around the door of the bridal suite. The hallway was packed with people, everyone's face filled with excitement and anticipation. The room was silent, not a sound could be heard. Marcus stood before the door, glancing back at the dozens of phone cameras held high behind him. Then we exchanged a glance. He twisted the doorknob and opened the door, turning on the light. The dimly lit room was instantly illuminated. Everyone at the doorway held their breath at that moment. Inside the room, a crystal chandelier cast brilliant light, illuminating everything clearly. The matrimonial bed, adorned with luxurious red bedding, was in disarray. Anne and Chloe were tangled together, their clothes disheveled. Their clothes were torn and scattered, their movements wild and primal, like two beasts who had lost all reason. Apparently, under the influence of the drug, they were not lucid, their eyes were hazy, and they emitted incoherent moans. After a second of dead silence, the crowd at the doorway suddenly erupted in gasps. Holy hell! What in the world is going on? The bride and the groomsmen? Immediately after, dozens of phone flashlights simultaneously flickered on. Click! 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 Shutter clicks rang out like dense raindrops, greedily capturing this sensational scene, easily the drama of the year. Videos and photos were furiously taken in mere seconds. Chloe's parents and her idle younger brother were also squeezed into the crowd. They had originally come along, expecting to enjoy a spectacle. But the moment they saw what was happening inside the room, the smiles on their faces froze completely. Their smiles were like cheap plaster masks, cracking piece by piece, then turning to an ashen pallor. Chloe's mother's lips trembled, her eyes wide as saucers, as if she'd seen a ghost. Chloe. She let out an inhuman shriek, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed backward, stiff as a board. The scene instantly devolved into chaos. Meanwhile, the two on the bed seemed to be disturbed by the commotion. Ethan's movements ceased. He dazedly lifted his head and looked towards the doorway. When he saw the dense crowd and the countless camera flashes aimed at him, the haziness in his eyes was gradually replaced by terror and disbelief. Grace? He saw me. I was standing at the very front of the crowd. While everyone's gaze was fixed on the couple on the bed, I struggled my way from the back of the crowd to the very front. The moment I realized what was happening in the room, my body swayed violently, as if unable to withstand the immense shock, and Marcus conveniently reached out to steady me. My face instantly turned ashen, completely devoid of color. My eyes first showed confusion, then shock, finally dissolving into overwhelming, heartbreaking disbelief. Ethan. My voice trembled, laced with a sob. Chloe. How could you? How could you do this to me? A single tear, perfectly timed, slid from the corner of my eye, tracing a path down my pale cheek. The image of being simultaneously betrayed by my beloved boyfriend and my most trusted best friend, fragile, helpless, and utterly pitiable. I'd say the Oscar owes me an award. Ethan's intoxication seemed to vanish completely at that moment. He frantically pushed Chloe off him, fumbling to find clothes to cover himself. No. It's not what you think. Grace. Let me explain. His voice was filled with panic and despair. Meanwhile, my ally Marcus erupted at the opportune moment. His rage was both genuine and theatrical. He felt his reputation, his dignity, along with that 500,000 in hard cash, had been thrown to the ground and mercilessly trampled into the mud by this despicable pair. Pointing at the disheveled couple on the bed, he unleashed a thunderous roar at Chloe's parents, who had just been brought back to consciousness and were still dazed. What a family! That's some upbringing. You all conspired to scheme against me, Marcus, and cuckold me at my own wedding? His chest heaved violently with anger, and veins bulged on his neck. The wedding is off. Call it off now. And my 500,000 in wedding funds, every single penny, spit it out immediately. Otherwise, I'll make sure your whole family faces severe consequences. Marcus's roar landed like a series of heavy hammers, striking Chloe's family deeply. Chloe's mother, having just regained consciousness, shrieked again and this time truly passed out completely. Her precious son, the sole male heir of Chloe's family, was also terrified, standing frozen and helpless like a quail. The chaos in the venue reached its peak at this moment. A more fatal blow came from a suddenly ringing phone. It was Chloe's younger brother's phone. He fumbled to answer the call, and from the other end came the heart-wrenching cries of a relative from his hometown. Kevin. It's terrible. Your grandma is dying. Just now we were watching the wedding livestream on our phones, and your sister. What happened in your sister's room? We saw everything. The old lady couldn't catch her breath, she had a heart attack right on the spot. She's been rushed to the hospital, and the doctors say she's not going to make it. This news, like a bolt from the blue, stunned everyone present. Chloe's younger brother's phone clattered to the floor. He was utterly dumbfounded. Chloe, lying on the bed, finally regained full consciousness and heard the phone call's contents. Grandma. She let out a mournful shriek, then her eyes rolled back, and she too passed out. The entire situation was completely out of control. I leaned against Marcus's arm, my head bowed, my shoulders trembling slightly, as if silently weeping. But from an unseen angle, the corner of my mouth curved into a cold, triumphant arc. The wedding farce concluded in a way no one had anticipated. Chloe's grandmother, in the end, could not be saved. A joyous occasion instantly turned into a funeral. Ethan and Chloe became the biggest scandal and laughingstock in the entire region. Their videos and photos had already gone viral in the guests' group chats. Afterward, Chloe's family tried to act shamelessly. They wailed and complained, claiming their daughter's reputation was utterly ruined and she would never be able to marry again. At the same time, they pleaded poverty, stating that the $500,000 in wedding funds had long been used for their son's down payment on a wedding house, and now they couldn't produce a single penny. They assumed that out of respect for the deceased, Marcus would show some consideration. They believed that with safety in numbers, and if their family caused a public scene, Marcus, being an outsider, would be powerless against them. They had severely underestimated Marcus. Or rather, they had severely underestimated the cunning of a businessman who had clawed his way up from nothing. Marcus didn't argue with them, nor did he even reappear. He simply carried out his revenge in the calmest, yet cruelest, way possible. The day after the farce, a lawyer's letter from the city's top law firm was delivered to Chloe's family. It clearly outlined evidence of Chloe's family's suspected marriage fraud and swindling, demanding they return the $500,000 in wedding funds within 3 days, or face immediate legal action. Chloe's family, upon receiving the lawyer's letter, dismissed it entirely, even cursing as they tore up the document. But then, the second blow came. Marcus leveraged his connections and easily uncovered all the information regarding their son's property purchase. Then, he directly contacted the developer of that housing complex. As soon as the developer heard it was Marcus, they immediately complied as a favor. That same afternoon, Chloe's family received a call from the sales office, informing them that the wedding house they had purchased for their son had its property transaction process urgently frozen by the bank due to suspected submission of false income statements during the loan application, constituting loan fraud. At this, Chloe's family completely panicked. That house was their sole hope for the rest of their lives. They tried to cause a scene at the sales office but were promptly escorted out by several tall, burly security guards. On the third day, Marcus's lawyer personally called Chloe's family. The lawyer's tone was as cold as a machine, devoid of any emotion. Mr. and Mrs. Sue, I have been authorized by Mr. Marcus to communicate with you one last time. Mr. Marcus is giving you 3 days to consider. Option 1, immediately return the $500,000. This matter will then be concluded. Option 2, you can continue to delay. In that case, you will not only receive a court summons, but your son will also be sued by the bank for loan fraud, potentially even facing criminal charges. At that point, not only will he not be able to marry, but your entire family will also face a fraud lawsuit together. Choose whether to recover the house or face utter ruin as a family. On the other end of the phone, there was a deathly silence. It was at this moment that Chloe's family truly realized what kind of individual they had provoked. Their boasted shameless theatrics were utterly fragile and defenseless against absolute power and ruthless business rules. That same afternoon, Chloe's family scraped together $500,000 and scrambled to deliver it to Marcus's company. Reportedly, they urgently sold the wedding house they had just bought at a price $30,000 below market value. Marcus received the money and, keeping his word, withdrew all legal proceedings. But the nightmare he brought upon Chloe's family was far from over. Drained of all their savings and having lost their wedding house, Chloe's family plunged into utter despair. They transferred all their resentment and debts onto Ethan. In their view, if not for Ethan's bad idea, if not for Ethan seducing their daughter, none of this would have happened. Grandma wouldn't have died, the wedding funds wouldn't have been returned, and their son's wedding house wouldn't have been lost. So, the entire family, acting like lunatics, blocked the entrance to Ethan's rented apartment. they wailed and beat their chests, attracting all the neighbors. They claimed Ethan had ruined Chloe's life, not only causing the old woman's death but also destroying Chloe's reputation. They demanded that Ethan must repay the $500,000. Because that $500,000 was rightfully Chloe's family's to begin with. Furthermore, Ethan had to take full responsibility for Chloe. Ethan was at his wits' end. He had been living a life worse than death recently. The employees at his company looked at him with contempt and ridicule. His hard-earned image as a promising young talent vanished overnight. All his savings were invested in his fledgling company, and with the cash flow already tight, how could he possibly come up with $500,000? Cornered, he thought of me. I was his only and last lifeline. When his call came in, I was in Marcus's office, discussing the preliminary cooperation plan for the new energy project. I saw the familiar name flashing on the screen and pressed the speakerphone button. Marcus looked up with interest, making a please proceed gesture to me. Grace. The moment the call connected, Ethan's pained, hoarse voice came through. Grace, I'm sorry, I know I was wrong, I truly know it. I'm a bastard, I'm not human, I was blinded and misled by that despicable Chloe. The one I truly love, from beginning to end, has only ever been you. He began to confess tearfully, pushing all the blame onto Chloe. Grace, believe me, I was just momentarily confused. Chloe's family is now forcing me to pay them back. My company is on the verge of collapse, and they're driving me to my death. Please, for the sake of what we once had, help me, just one last time, okay? If you help me get through this, I swear, I'll be your servant for the rest of my life to repay you. His cries sounded so genuine, so full of sorrow. I listened to him in silence, then slowly spoke in a tone so calm it was utterly devoid of emotion. Did you think I knew nothing? Unfortunately for you, I knew everything from the very beginning. The moment you decided to scheme against me, everything between us was over. I paused, then stated clearly, word for word, as for Chloe, isn't she your true love? I wish you both 100 years of harmony and many sons soon. With that, I gave him no further chance to speak, hung up the phone directly, and then dragged his number into my blacklist. The world instantly fell silent. Marcus, across from me, let out a low chuckle. Ms. Grace, that was ruthless. I picked up my teacup and blew on the floating tea leaves. There's no need to go easy on trash. With his escape routes completely cut off by me, Ethan could only turn to his parents for help. Ethan's parents were ordinary working-class people, diligent their entire lives, and highly valued their reputation. When they learned from relatives and friends that their proud son had committed such a disgraceful and even indirectly fatal scandal, both elderly parents were so enraged they nearly fainted on the spot. Ethan's mother, in particular, pointed her finger at him and scolded him for an entire night. But a scolding was a scolding, ultimately, he was their own flesh and blood. They couldn't stand by and watch their son face a lawsuit, much less be branded with the reputation of driving someone to their death. In the end, Ethan's parents took out their life's retirement savings. Then, swallowing their pride, they sought out every relative and friend, pooling together resources until they finally managed to collect $500,000 to repay Chloe's family on Ethan's behalf. They thought that once the money was repaid, the matter would be settled. But they were still too naive. After receiving the money, Chloe's family not only didn't back down but intensified their demands. Using the excuse that their daughter's reputation was completely ruined by Ethan, and she would never be able to marry again, they forced Ethan to marry Chloe. Otherwise, they threatened to cause a scene at Ethan's parents' workplaces and hang banners in their neighborhood, ensuring their entire family would be disgraced. Ethan's parents were completely driven to despair by this shameless family. To finally put an end to the matter, and to salvage what little dignity they had left, they gritted their teeth and with tears in their eyes, agreed to the marriage. A week later, Ethan and Chloe were escorted to the county's office by both sets of parents, like prisoners being led to their fate. They obtained their marriage certificate. In that official wedding photo, both of them looked ashen, their eyes hollow, devoid of any joy. They were like two puppets bound together by fate. They began a married life destined for mutual hatred and lifelong torment. Their shackles were forged and placed upon each other by their own hands. 6 months later, Everest Executive Boardroom. As the overall head of the new energy project, I officially signed the final strategic cooperation agreement with Marcus. With my strong advocacy and Marcus's formidable execution, the project's initial pilot phase was a resounding success, bringing immense, beyond expected profits to both the group and Marcus's company. Thanks to this outstanding achievement, my position within the group was solidified and recognized to an unprecedented degree. At the celebration reception following the signing ceremony, elegantly dressed guests mingled, their glasses clinking. I stood by a massive floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of champagne in hand, gazing down at the city's dazzling nightscape. My assistant approached me, reporting in a low voice, "Ms. Grace, we just received news. Ethan's small company filed for bankruptcy last week due to a complete break in its capital chain. His parents sold their only house to pay off his debts, now the whole family is squeezed into a rental. Also, Chloe's brother is a bottomless pit of a scoundrel. He harasses them for money every few days, causing a scene if they refuse. Apparently, Ethan and Chloe fight constantly at home over money and trivial matters. Their life is a mess, and neighbors have called the police several times." I listened quietly, my face unruffled. These reports could no longer stir any ripples in my heart. Those people, those events, were already like dust from another century to me, not worth mentioning. I simply swirled the champagne in my glass, my gaze passing over the bustling crowd to meet Marcus's eyes across the room, where he was being toasted by several business magnates. Today, he wore a well-tailored custom suit, his hair meticulously styled, exuding more of the demeanor of a poised entrepreneur. He seemed to feel my gaze, calmly concluded his conversation with others, raised his glass, and toasted me from afar. In both our eyes, there was a mutual understanding and knowing glance of successful collaboration. We were the same kind of people, rational, calm, willing to use any means to achieve our goals. Perhaps not friends, but certainly, top-tier partners. He walked over to me, stood by my side, and looked out at the myriad of lights illuminating the city. "Ms. Grace, what are you looking at?" "I'm looking at next quarter's market strategy." I smiled faintly. "Mr. Marcus, interested in discussing it?" Marcus let out a hearty laugh. "I'd be delighted." We exchanged smiles and clinked our glasses. The crisp sound blended into the bustling night. As for those living in the quagmire, let them rot in the past forever. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it with your friends. We look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments, so feel free to share your opinions, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting stories. See you next time.